Hey everybody, it's a Saturday. I'm not going to do any shop work today, but I thought I would come out quick while Henry's at a birthday party and change the saw blade on my little bandsaw and do some maintenance. So I thought I'd show you what I worked on. So check it out. So this is my silver bandsaw. You've seen this on some other videos. This is the first big project I ever worked on, and it was a bandsaw made somewhere around 1910, 1915, and it would have been ran on a flat belt system, so it never would have been designed to have its own motor. So today what I needed to do first was change the blade, and I always use Timberwolf bandsaw blades, and this one is 1/4 inch and it's 1/16 per inch, so this is for cutting curves and general use like that. The main thing I wanted to do while the blade was off was replace the spring. So this spring in the machine was completely bottomed out and it's pretty worn, and I found some springs at a junk shop and I thought I'd try them out. So I had these other ones too. This one, when I put it in, just completely bottomed out, didn't add any tension. This was too narrow. The one I put in was actually too tall to begin with because it's so stiff, so I had to cut part of it off. So I cut that off with a grinder. And now you can see it's almost bottomed out, but not quite. So there is some tension in there, and it's helping me keep the blade nice and tight. So the first thing was the spring. And if you were 100 years old, you'd look a little worn out too, but it did its best. While I was at it, I actually did some lubrication. So this saw on the top here, this is just a cast iron wheel on a cast iron shaft. There's no bearing beyond the cast iron material in there. And despite the fact that there's this grease zerk there, that's intended to be lubricated with oil. So got some 20 weight oil in this little can. And then the bottom is on Babbitt bearings. So Babbitt is a kind of lead, and it's a good bearing material. So it's a cast iron shaft on a sort of lead called Babbitt. And you see the little oiler cup there, so that takes just a few drops of that same oil. But the motor is a mid-century motor. What is this? Is it GE? Yeah, it's a GE motor, and the capacitor is actually like a flat capacitor that sits at the bottom of the motor. It's a really nice design, well-made motor. Sorry, there's all this junk in the way. Oh, here we go. General Electric. Yeah, so I put, for that takes grease. So use the grease gun on the Zerks. And what was nice is when I got this grease gun and the kind of grease that I got, I can't remember what it is, but it's Bob from Bob Mass Woodworks on Instagram told me what to get. I don't remember what it is, but it's blue. So the first time I ever pumped into that motor, I pumped like 3 times, and then all of a sudden grease came out the bottom. So that means I've been running this machine basically with no grease in it. So it just takes like 1 pump every 6 months or so for how much I use it. And then I just blew the thing off, got rid of the dust as best I could, and put a blade on and did some test cuts. So new spring, new blade, lubrication. One thing I do need to deal with is this isn't really the best place for this saw, because you can see the belt either needs a belt guard on it, or I gotta find a way to deal with these cables. I usually tuck them back there. These cables are in the way for using the saw all the time, but it's right under this electrical box. So that's the cable for, like, if you had a little table saw, some routers, the saw itself. I gotta come up with a better way to get those out of the way. So anyway, there's the silver. Let's give it a So even though there is a little wobble in the top wheel where it's just a cast iron bearing, it runs true enough like that. Long term, I still need to do some work on these guides. The roller bearing works fine, but these are so worn, they need to be taken out and machined properly. I tried to grind them once and it wasn't good enough. I need to go to a friend's with a surface grinder. So there you go, some Saturday maintenance. Postscript, I grabbed a piece of wire and just grabbed all of these cables, put a piece of wire around it, and now they're out of the way of this belt. They're also out of the way of the phase converter down there, and out of the way of these left and right when we use this little table saw. And by the way, the reason this mess is down here too is this is the rotary phase converter to run 3-phase power to my shop, and maybe I ought to build a box for that or something sometime. But that's the motor, that's the big capacitors box, and that's the old junction box it came with. And then coming out of the back of it on the floor there is another 3-phase hookup for another 3-phase machine if I needed it, which is nice. So this is a little cleaner back here now.